Okay, we're back on the Investigative Journal on this June 3rd, 2015 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. Catch my show every evening from Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. And today, I want to continue my discussion on the importance of September 23rd, 2015 to the occult, to the Vatican, to our government officials, to NASA, to all of those people out there that are creating basically a false flag event like they've created in the past in so many different ways. Now, we were discussing how Bluebeam, this project Bluebeam, intersects with this and how this technology used by NASA, used by the military, are basically there to create a one-world government, a one-world religion, a one-world mindset, and this idea that it's better to unite the entire world under peace and security when, in fact, the only way it's being done is through wars raging all over the world. And the question is, it's a bunch of double talk. Now, back in 1970, in Psychology Today, there was a psychologist named Gene V. McClellan. Now, he published this, and it's very interesting because it's in regards to Project Bluebeam, in regards to what is going on to the masses. And he said, the day has come when we can combine sensory deprivation with drugs, hypnosis, and astute manipulation of reward and punishment to gain almost absolute control over an individual's behavior. It should be then possible to achieve a very rapid and highly effective type of positive brainwashing that would allow us to make dramatic change in a person's behavior and personality. Now, today I'm going to deal with the some of the things we couldn't get to yesterday regarding Project Bluebeam, and then I'm going to move into another area of discussion that I've been researching. I've spent hundreds of hours on it so far and find it quite interesting how far the brainwashing really goes. And I think it really goes to the fact we don't even know what the earth we live on is really like. And I'm going to talk about that probably in the second half hour. But the psychologist also said we could reshape society so that we would be trained from birth to want to do what societies want us to do. We have the techniques to do it. No one owns his own personality. Interesting. And this quote here is really important, I think, because it is also a basic teaching of the United Nations, that no one owns his own personality. The same psychologist adds this: you have no say about what kind of personality you acquire. And there's no reason to believe you should have the right to refuse to acquire a new personality if your old one is antisocial. Now, what Mr. Monest, who was writing this article back in the 90s, said this. And he was quoting the psychologist, and this is his quote. He says, which is important in that kind of declaration here? If the New World Order will be set up over the old one, that means that the old way of thinking, the way we think right now, our behavior, our religious beliefs, would be considered by those as old thinking, an old way of living, and they will have to change it. The re-education camps of the United Nations to make sure that people will have, for them, an antisocial behavior, which is today an actual one, will be re-educated in a way to have the new behavior to fulfill the needs of the New World Order. So basically, this project was set up, and they have. Look, the technology is there. Now, they have kind of raised telepathic electronic two-way communications, and we have done shows showing how electronic weaponry and all these mind control techniques exist, all the way to the fact where they can create cities that don't exist, as they did in China as a test project, so that people woke up and looked over the Yangtze River, I believe it was, and they saw a new city there and were amazed. Then the next day they woke up, it was gone. Now, might it be that this is the largest mind control project ever, and because NASA's Blue Beam project is also not only going to has implemented this fake idea of how they travel into space, the aliens, Mars, all of these fake planets that they've created, which might be only stars like our ancestors told us. This fake world they've created has surpassed Hollywood. Hollywood is used as a staging ground, as a way to tell us things. But NASA, this is the biggest project that intersects also with September 23rd, all of these military things going on with Jade Helm. And when we look at NASA, how much do you believe that comes out of that place? Are you a person that believes the moon landing occurred? Or are you one that believes it doesn't, but you believe in their theories of gravity? You believe in their other theories that, if you really look at it from a logical point of view, they have a hard time making any kind of sense. In fact, they use gravity as their answer for everything when they can't explain something. What about the movie Gravity? And I'll tell you what. If you look at NASA's projects, how far will you go? Are you one that believes there wasn't a moon landing, but there are space stations out there, or there are 20,000 satellites floating all around, and now they're on there? We have Hubble telescope that gives us all of these, I believe, CGI generated pictures, but can't give us one good picture. I mean, they should be flooding us with thousands of pictures of how the South Pole really looks, how the Earth really looks. But they give us this one globe that if they do over a time-lapse period of time, and you'll see that over 12 hours, the clouds don't move. That's impossible. And the reason is they can't do it right. So they have to just leave them stationary. They stay in the same spot. Now, since when does a cloud stay in the same spot for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours? So might this be, this NASA Blue Beam project, the largest mind control project ever, to get you to never question anything so they can rake in billions and billions of dollars, creating false images and a false belief system that has not been tested. That's my only gripe. I'm not saying I know exactly what's the situation of the universe, or how the Earth is shaped, or all of the little technicalities, but I will tell you this: I don't believe anything that comes out of NASA's mouth. They're not there to get at the truth. They're there to control your mind, and also to implement a new world religion. This is where the Vatican comes into play. Why do you think the Vatican has all these telescopes, all these... You go to Castel Gandolfo in Rome, they got this big, huge astronomy center. You go to Mount Graham. You have all these Jesuits acting as astronomers, working in this. Why do you think they're there? I believe they're there so they can create the greatest holographic image of the new Messiah coming, or all of these great images that now we can do technically, showing Mother Mary sitting in my tree. And their techniques can go to the point where she can actually actually talk and even get into your brain. Yeah. It's a mind control project. So I would suggest you examine the evidence that I present on this show and that others are presenting to you before you go off half-cocked and say, oh, these guys are crazy. It's exactly as NASA said. The world spins around 64,000 miles an hour. Jade Helm is there to protect us, this military operation. The Pope is coming to give us a message of peace. And America will stand and fight for its freedom for the remainder of my life, at least. Boy, that's a mind control statement if I've ever heard one. Now, we can go all the way back into this. Laurel, let's talk about a company. You don't think they have these techniques? I'll go way back 30, 40 years. The mind control operation in technology includes a transmitter which broadcasts at a frequency of human nervous system, which system is manufactured by the Laurel Electro-Optical System in Pasadena, California. Laurel, a major defense contractor, years ago had previously conducted research on directed energy weapons for Lieutenant General Leonard Perez of the U.S. Air Force, who was searching for a weapon to implant messages into the minds of the enemy and to urge his own truth into superhuman deeds of valor. Now, who is the enemy? Ask yourself that. The enemy is anyone who's not going to play ball with the New World Order. Now, this device employed electromagnetic radiation of jiggers, frequency pulse at extremely low frequency, ELFs. It's used to torture people, both physically and mentally, from a distance. Weapons of this type are claimed to have been used against a British woman protesting the presence of American cruise missiles way back when they were testing the Sonos guinea pigs at Gresham, Common Air Force Base in the 1970s. The weapon can also be used to induce total sensory deprivation by broadcasting signals into the auditory nerves at such a power that it blocks the victim's ability to hear themselves think. The device has taken the concept of the old phrase, "It is so noisy in here I can't hear myself think," and turned it into a powerful weapon of terror. The process employed by such ELF technologies are described in various U.S. Defense Department publications, including one entitled The Electromagnetic Spectrum and Low-Intensity Conflict. Now, when I was doing stories about hundreds of people being affected by this, by electromagnetic weaponry, I had to get it verified, and I verified from the military itself that these weapons do exist. A high-ranking general back in even 2009 come out publicly and stated, after there's been a clamor at his door from people who are going, "Do you have these weapons that we talk about?" And they admitted, yes, but we use them only on enemies of the state, foreign enemies, or we might use them on unruly American mobs. So they exist. The question is, they're using them on citizens as guinea pigs. They're using them on people all around the world as guinea pigs. Yes. And they're covering it up just like they cover up the Nassau fraud, just like they cover up the chemtrail fraud, just like they covered up 9/11, just like they covered up Waco, just like they covered up Fukushima and really what's going on there, just like they're even covering up, there's so much more to talk about, even in the atomic energy field, that is amazing, but we won't get into that today. Now, this stuff was published in the Electromagnetic Spectrum and Low-Intensity Conflict, written by Captain Paul E. Tyler, United States Navy, which is included in a collection entitled Low-Intensity Conflicts in Modern Technology, edited by Lieutenant Colonel David. I don't know his last name. U.S. Air Force. The paper was delivered in 1984, and the collection published in 1986 by the Air Force University Press, Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. Another pulse micro-weaponry device can deliver audible signals directly to an individual while they remain undetectable by anyone else. This technology is very simple and can be built by using an ordinary police radar gun. The microwave beam generated by the device is moderated at audio frequencies and can broadcast voices directly into the brain. And here we come for that NASA Blue Beam project. As we're talking about at the beginning, the telepathic electronic two-way communications from anywhere going exactly with that kind of technology. So, check out a couple books on this subject of microwave weaponry, how it intersects with Jade Helm, how they have those weapons probably at their disposal, and all those military vehicles you're seeing on our roads the past month or so that'll continue into the summer. But look up The Body Electric by Robert Becker. He describes experiments conducted on innocent people in the 60s, when this first was demonstrated, and in 1973 at Walter Reed Army Institute. And Dr. Sharp there personally underwent tests in which he proved he could hear and understand spoken words delivered to him in an echo-free isolation chamber via a pulse microwave audiogram. An analog of a word, sound vibration beamed directly into his brain. And some of the books continue to go on. Now, let's look back in 1977. The effects of all this microwave weaponry were studied at length in testimony even before the Senate Subcommittee on Health and Scientific Research. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, who directed the MKUltra program at that time, was forced to discuss these aspects of the CIA's research to find techniques of how they could control human organs by remote electronic means, how they could destroy these organs, etc., etc. If we go a little deeper into the kind of process of mind control over people, we find for the year in 1988, this is Mr. Manast found this information, the equipment and technology in 1988. What kind of technology and mind control have we used to influence politics in much more direct fashion? Even look back when Michael Dukakis, remember him, the Democratic presidential candidate running against Bush in '88, that's Daddy Bush. He said he was targeted by microwave technology in order to impede his public speaking performance, when opinion polls said he may have threatened Bush's election. He also claims that the equipment was used by Kitty Dukakis on his wife and drove her to the brink of suicide. I mentioned this the other day. Folks, it's a mental battlefield we're playing. Now, I believe that these new mental battlefields are being used to the extent today that NASA's Blue Beam project has basically created a false science, created a false belief since the first time you saw a globe in your classroom when you were a kid, of how they want you to project yourself in this world. Think about it. We're just a speck in this big, huge Big Bang universe that they have not been able to prove. It's all theory. It's all speculation built on billions of dollars of money, which make you believe it. So we're nothing. We've come from algae, or we've come from apes. They're taking away every bit of your importance in the world, in the universe, as us being the center of it, of us being stable, not a spinning globe going 64,000 miles an hour. And you know, the crazy thing about it is you don't feel anything, but you believe them. The next thing I want to mention is they're taking away your religion as well. They've created science to be the religion. Yes, science is, they're the religious leaders. Look at all their satanic symbols that they have in every corner of our Capitol building, in every corner of the United Nations. And isn't it interesting that the United Nations logo is a flat earth? And one other thing I want to mention, check out the Antarctica Treaty. When countries, when this was formed in 59 or 60, back in the 50s, and this was to protect, I believe, the ice wall surrounding this earth, not Antarctica, because it doesn't exist. And the reason it doesn't exist is because they're hiding it. showing you pictures that don't exist, showing you a globe. Oh, it's got to be there because the globe says it is. But at a time when the world was at war, at a time when Russia and America were about ready to blow each other up, I remember we were told as kids to go under our desks. They seemed to have a treaty agreement, Russia, America, and now, 64 other countries, that no one can go into Antarctica and explore. They seem to have been able to agree on this, but nothing else. Do you think that if two countries were really at war against one another, that we wouldn't have taken control of that territory and said, screw you people, we're going to take control of the Antarctica if it existed? But what it is they're protecting areas they have no idea. They may know a little bit more than we do because we can't even go in there. Try to get permission. Why should you even get permission to do an exploration in Antarctica? It's impossible. Oh, they'll email them, and they'll start asking you questions. Why do you want to go? And I remember doing it, and I told them I had all this money, and I had all these backers, and we have plans even to take drones into this area to explore what is beyond what others have tried to do in the past. Why you're blocking, and boy, they are interested. Who are you? What are you doing? You can't do that. Okay. All just another cover-ups. How far does the cover-up really go? How far do you think it goes? I have people who, they'll say, oh, I don't believe in the moon landing, but they believe in space and all these other things they're doing. They believe that there's a space shuttle and all this kind of garbage. Then I have people who realize that, people who can't get they realize the New World Order is trying to take away their rights, but they can't believe the Vatican would be involved in that because the Pope is the vicar of Christ. Now, these are mental battlefields. The NASA Blue Beam Project is there also to implement New World religion, the new Messiah. The beginning of it could be September 23rd when the Pope does an unprecedented thing, talks to Congress for the first time, and our congressional leaders are saying they're waiting for his message. Why don't they just say they realize he's the Antichrist and they're implementing the satanic spell over all of us? Now, in December of 1980, an edition of the U.S. Army Journal, which is called Military Review, there was an article by Colonel John B. Alexander entitled, "The New Mental Battlefield, Beam Me Up, Spock," provides further insight into the technical capabilities. This was back in the 80s. Now at the disposal of these controllers. You know what he said back then? Let's see how much time we got. Well, I better go to a break, and I'm going to tell you what he said back in the 80s. And you can bet it's been perfected even more today. You're listening to the Investigative Journal on FirstAmendmentRadio.com. We're pulling together some thoughts about the importance of September 23rd, 2015. As well as NASA's Blue Beam Project, and how it affects us today. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host, Melody Cedarstrom, right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, we're back on the Investigative Journal going over NASA's Blue Beam Project, significance of September 23rd, 2015, to the occult, Jade Helm, other things that are all coming together, it seems at once, at one time, for some, I believe, false flag event that will take place within the next year and a half. That's just my thinking. I could be wrong, but do some research, see where we're going. Some people say it's going to happen quicker, others say no. One thing I do want to say, though, is as I just turned, within 2 minutes in the break, I just switched the Weather Channel on, which I had on, and turned the volume up, and listened to the propaganda, listened to the brainwashing. Oh, today, guess what? Is the 50th anniversary of America's first spacewalk in 1965. What a bunch of garbage. And then they show this guy floating around. Let's just tell the truth. They do it in a swimming pool. And if you really look closely at a lot of it, you can see the bubbles. I've seen bubbles. Bubbles exist in space, I guess. And then I've even caught them I've seen the scuba tanks. They miss a little bit here and there. And they're doing that today. So, you listen to all of it. I mean, it's just absurd. Right to the point. You get these guys on those Weather Channel telling you all about all this, probably this controlled HAARP weather. And they feed you the story. The globe makes absolutely no sense when you really look at it. I've gotten so many facts I'd like to discuss with you that probably would blow your mind right now, so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to have to do it slowly. Because all I'm doing is trying to say to you, how far does the deception go? And let's figure it out. Hey, if somebody can prove me that NASA's doing this legit, fine. But they can't. Now, I remember I got back to 1980, and he was saying this project they're working on to implement this new religion, this new world order from NASA, using holographic images, using all of this kind of microwave weaponry that the military is harnessing. Here's what he said in his article, Lieutenant Colonel John B. Alexander, The New Mental Battlefield. He said, similar examples will demonstrate areas in which progress has been made. He calls it progress. I call it torture. I call it Nazi torture. The transference of energy from one organism to another. The ability to heal or cause disease. Now, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to use it to heal you? No, they're going to use it to kill you. It can be transmitted over a distance, thus inducing illness or death for no apparent cause. He's telling you they can do it. Telepathic behavior modification, which includes the ability to induce hypnotic states up to distances in excess of 1,000 kilometers, has been reported. The use of telepathic hypnosis also holds great potential. The capability could allow agents to be deeply planted with no conscious knowledge of their programming. And now I asked, what about the Manchurian Candidate? Remember that? And does not even require a phone call. Other mind-to-mind induction techniques are being considered. If perfected, this capability could allow the direct transference of thought via telepathy from one mind or group of minds to a select target audience. The unique factor is that the recipient will not be aware that thought has been implanted from an external source. He or she will believe thoughts are original, his own. Isn't that the ultimate deception? And what did I tell you a long time ago? Their goal is to take away your mind, body, and soul. Now, this is exactly what we're talking about. And the third step of this NASA Blue Beam project calls for telepathic electronic two-way communication. And the article continues. If it is possible to feed artificial thoughts into the genetic via mind control of the entire planet, it's possible. The individual's only resistance to constantly question the motivation behind their thoughts and not act upon thoughts that they consider to be outside the boundaries of their own ethical and moral boundaries and ethics set by the United Nations. Okay. So we've got an idea of what's going on. Now, what about the third orientation? The second, well, one of their things they want to do is make Christians believe to a major rapture. With the supposedly divine intervention of an alleged good alien force coming to save the people from a brutal satanic attack, its goal is to get rid of the significant opposition to the New World Order. They're going to create a situation like this. The third orientation and maybe the fourth step is a mixture of electronic and supernatural forces, holographic images. The wave used at times will allow supernatural forces to travel through optic fiber, coaxial cable, and the use of TV, electronic phone line in order to penetrate everywhere an electronic equipment. Appliances will be already installed with microchips. This is written back in the 80s, and it's coming to pass. The goal of this one deals with global satanic creations all around the world in order to push all the population to the edge, killing and permanent psychological disorders. Now, let's move on a little bit here. And the reason I want to move on is because I think we've exhausted some of the things behind what's going on with Jade Helm now, what's going on with the Pope's visit, what's going on with certain things that we talked about the French Foreign Minister and John Kerry telling us on May 14th, 2014, that we had 500 days till climate chaos, a very strange message. And my whole point goes to this. How far will you go to believe that they're telling you the truth? I'm going to play something here. It's about 20 minutes. I probably won't get through it all. But it is a historical look at some of the people who didn't believe NASA, who were even researching this prior to NASA. And then you're going to see exactly things that should have been told to us in school. But we're not given the truth when we go to school. We're given the lies that they want to tell us, or the false science that they want to create in order to control us from the time we were young. So let's look at this with an open mind and have some really good research involving NASA's hoax, perhaps, that we live on a round ball spinning around the sun. Let's listen to this.
Antarctica, frigid, barren, seemingly endless. On December the 3rd, 1961, a 63-year-old woman by the name of Andrea Barnes set off single-handedly across this barrier of ice. On December the 18th, the weather turned against her. A week later, on Christmas Day, radio contact was lost. Miss Barnes was never seen again. This was to be the final leg in a journey that had started for her nearly half a century before. A journey ending in apparent failure. She had not succeeded in proving to the world that the Earth is flat.
In Search of the Edge.
It has a flat top, and it's shaped like a top.
Inquiring into the shape of the Earth and the disappearance of Andrea Barnes.
There's a certain amount of depth here, because there must be a vertical axis on which it rotates, and the stability of the mass would indicate that there must be some depth, or wobble could very easily occur, and we know that there is none.
It's a commonly held misconception that the Earth is a spherical object that revolves around the Sun. But the fact is, of course, that the Earth is a circular dish surrounded by a barrier of ice that explorers like Andrea Barnes have been attempting to penetrate for centuries. In 1585, amid a storm of controversy and under cover of darkness, an adventurer by the name of Afton Marcella stole out of London in hopes of being the first to reach the edge of the Earth. But he was unprepared for the extreme conditions. His crew was plagued by scurvy and frostbite. Food supplies ran low. Marcella was forced to turn back before setting foot on Antarctica. So ended the first recorded expedition. But the controversy goes back much further than that. Since long before the dawn of recorded history, we've been trying to understand the world around us. And we've constantly turned to the sky for answers. By unlocking the keys to the stars, the sun, and the moon, it was reasoned, we would learn more about the Earth. So we've remained ever vigilant, turning both our persistence and our technology to the task at hand. But the conclusions have not always been particularly well thought out. 2,000 years ago, an Egyptian scholar by the name of Eratosthenes performed an experiment that he claimed proved the Earth to be a sphere. However, there are serious doubts about the accuracy of his data and his scientific procedures. Dr. Leo Ferrari explains.
Oh, the Eratosthenes experiment is an experiment supposedly conducted in the 1st century, whereby this ingenious person was supposed to have proved, I say that in quotes, that the Earth was a sphere of some 4,000 miles radius. Eratosthenes one day noticed that the sun was directly overhead in Syene, whereas he noticed that on the same day, at the same time, the sun made an angle of 7.2 degrees to the vertical at Alexandria, which was some 530 miles away. How did Eratosthenes in the 1st century know what the sun was doing on the same day in two places which are 530 miles apart? One can take all those same data, knowing that the Earth is flat. In one place you have the sun directly overhead, and at another place, at the same time, at 530 miles away, let us suppose that it does make an angle of 7.2 degrees to the vertical. Then we have a right-angled triangle, which it can be easily shown that the sun is some 4,000 miles up in the sky. These superficial, even, considerations show that it's impossible. The whole thing, it's a story, a fairy story made up and mindlessly repeated in textbooks.
Fortunately, not all scientific arguments are based on such questionable research. The Greek astronomer Ptolemy determined to everyone's satisfaction that the Earth is flat, circular, and the central body in the universe. His theory went unchallenged for 1,200 years. Not surprising, really. One need only look around. However, the notion that it was some other shape gained some acceptance during the Renaissance. These were impoverished times. Most writers, artists and scientists could not support themselves through their work. They depended on the patronage of the upper class. Consequently, creative and original thinking men let their imaginations run rampant in order to attract support. The fact that Leonardo da Vinci designed a flying machine late in the 15th century confirms that the sky was the limit to which scientists would go to impress potential backers. And an examination of the shape of the Earth was a popular theme. In 1543, the Polish astronomer Copernicus suggested the bizarre notion that the Earth is a round ball that circles the sun. But his book emphasized it was only a hypothesis. He further avoided controversy by withholding the book for 13 years, and then by dying on the day it was published. Edmund Halley, the highly esteemed British astronomer, best known for the comet named after him, proposed that the Earth is made up of several concentric spheres, each supporting life, placed inside one another in the manner of a Chinese box puzzle. Marshall B. Gardner, however, insisted that the Earth is completely hollow except for a small sun that lights the interior. The argument, for all practical purposes, came to an end when the Church of England was established by law during the 16th century. They rejected many laws of the ancient Catholic Church, and to appear forward-thinking, they embraced many radical scientific notions prevalent at the time, including Copernicus' round Earth theory. With this endorsement, the theory found its way into the schools, which were then largely controlled by the Church. It has remained there to this day, and many children have accepted it without question. Andrea Barnes was not one of those children. Born into an Ontario farming family in 1898, Andrea was a bright child who spent much of her time learning about the world around her. She was inquisitive and precocious, and much to her teacher's dismay, she fervently believed the global Earth concept was nonsensical and easily refuted. Many scientists agree with her and are amassing evidence to carry on her work.
There's all kinds of proofs right around you that show that the Earth is flat. A very simple one to think of is that we use plumb bobs to build buildings. In other words, to get the wall of a building going straight down, you'll take a string with a heavy weight hanging from it, and you'll make the building follow that string. That plumb bob will point to the center of a round Earth. That means that if you imagine that this was the correct Earth, you can imagine a plumb bob held here would point in that direction, and a plumb bob held here would point in that direction. That means the buildings would be bigger on the top than at the bottom.
It would also mean that boats would constantly be sailing downhill. And invariably, in any discussion about the shape of the Earth, the first argument used in support of its rotundity is that as ships sail out to sea, the tops of their masts are visible longer than the hull.
The fact is, of course, that the light rays from the lower part of the ship are no longer reaching the shore. When we consider so eminent an authority as Einstein postulated and indeed proved, that light rays bend perceptibly in gravitational fields, it should not be surprising that the light rays from the lower parts of the ship do not succeed in reaching the shore, are incapable of entering the eye of an observer, and so the particular part of the ship from which those light rays come is not seen.
But it was hundreds of years before Einstein's time when explorers like Sir Francis Drake and Ferdinand Magellan were pushing out the boundaries of the known world. And it wasn't easy. As they ventured further and further from established trade routes, the fear of coming to the edge of the world and falling off became a very real one. Sailors became increasingly apprehensive about joining such an expedition. So Copernicus' notion that the Earth was a ball you couldn't fall off of was readily embraced by businessmen. And when Magellan's crew claimed to have circumnavigated the globe in 1522, it was seen as a new piece in the scientific puzzle. But more importantly, it was seen as a strong psychological boost for free enterprise. It's also been seen as a huge publicity stunt.
The sailor thinks that he's traveling around the Earth this way, when in effect he's traveling around the Earth this way. And he's creating a circle. He's moving in a continuous direction around. He goes through the various parts of the circle, and he comes back where he started from, spun around this way.
Does running round your neighborhood prove that the neighborhood is round?
By the time Andrea was in her teens, her brother Andy had already decided to go into the transportation business, and many of her friends had turned to nursing as a vocation. But Andrea devoted her time to exploring the world around her and to questioning. She was vehemently opposed to the use of globes in schools and formed a group to protest what she referred to as a load of old codswallop. They demonstrated in a manner they felt symbolic. But Andrea soon realized the only way people would listen was if she made a trip to the edge and brought back proof. And so, on her 16th birthday, she set off across the snowy deserts of Antarctica with little more than a borrowed pair of skis. However, like Marcella some 300 years earlier, she was unprepared for the harsh conditions and was soon forced to turn back. She tried to raise money for a larger expedition, but her cause was overshadowed by the outbreak of World War I, and it became more important to worry about maintaining one's stake in the world than arguing over its shape. Although they never met, Andrea's mentor was this man, Samuel Burley Rowbottom, better known throughout the scientific community as Parallax. In 1881, he had published this book, Earth Not a Globe. Outlining dozens of experiments performed over many years, it quickly became the standard authority for anti-globularists. Perhaps the most significant experiments were those carried out on a canal known as the Old Bedford Level. Located in Cambridgeshire, England, the canal is perfectly straight over an uninterrupted 6-mile stretch. While there, Parallax conducted many experiments, all towards one conclusion, to prove that the surface of the water in the canal was indeed perfectly flat. In one experiment, a boat carrying a flag rowed from one bridge to another 6 miles away. An observer with a telescope placed 8 inches above the surface of the water found that the flag and the boat were distinctly visible throughout the entire distance. If the Earth is a sphere with a circumference of 25,000 miles, then over a distance of 6 miles, the second bridge should mathematically be 16 feet below the observer's eye line. But in spite of the mathematical evidence, any further attempts to restore belief in the flat Earth seem doomed by one of the supposed great moments in modern scientific achievement. At last, after thousands of years of uncertainty, man was able to get far enough away from the Earth to have a good look at it in all its resplendent beauty. It did appear curved, and photographs were brought back for all to see. However, according to experts, these photographs are much less conclusive than one might think.
Einstein told us that light actually is attracted by gravity. In other words, the path of light is not straight in a strong gravitational field. So, astronauts looking at the Earth see a curved Earth, but what they don't realize is that it's not the Earth that's curved, it's the light taking a curved path from the Earth because of the strong gravitational field of the Earth that makes the Earth look curved.
Well, we're going to drop it off at that because we're leaving it where NASA now has entered into this field and proven to us categorically by their computer-generated images. We've gone a lot farther than the gentleman here was talking about with light refraction. But we've been able to prove that they actually Photoshop these things and the images that are sent back are interesting because there are very few images of the Earth. And they use the same one over and over again. Just go to NASA's, they have a 24-hour website supposedly taking live pictures from the space station. And when you look at that for an extended period of time, you'll see that it is basically ridiculous. Now, we can get into more. There's so many things out there, and I better check the time here. People that have researched this and have looked at the space station and looked at things and showed you how false it is. But we don't have time. We're going to run out of time right now, so we'll be back on the Investigative Journal with more. Good night.